Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Thank you for tuning in to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman, and I got a great episode today. David RIPPY, who I've interviewed before, is my guest today, and David has an amazing story. He was, as a very young man, he was paralyzed from the shoulders down in a car accident, and has since gone on to have a successful career as a money manager, and then segued into matters of healing and spirituality and all things behind the veil. And I love that about him. He's a very interesting and curious guy who's read a lot of books and experimented with his own health and his own body in staying healthy through vitamins and taking blood tests and staying current with his medical condition. You know, people that are paralyzed have a tendency to get sick in a lot of other ways, and he's been able to study his own body and overcome a lot of the problems that a lot of the people that have paralysis go through. He's also explored the power of the mind and hypnosis and things like that. So we're talking to him today about his second book, which is called Through Paralysis. Very upbeat and positive look at how someone who's had such a traumatic injury has managed to lead a very fulfilling life. So please listen in. This is David RIPPY. David, hi.
Hello, Bob.
It is so good to talk to you again. You know, you're my first person that I've interviewed a second time, so congratulations.
Well, I feel honored.
We had such a great talk last time, and I know you've written another book.
It's called Powering Through Paralysis, How to Survive and Thrive with Disability or Disease.
Yes, and I was looking through the book. What I loved was how you started different chapters with quotes, and I wanted to start with this first quote that I loved. It was, "How very little can be done under the spirit of fear," and that was from Florence Nightingale. And I thought that was a kind of a cool place to start because, you know, after your accident and being paralyzed, and I'm sure there was a tremendous amount of fear of what's going to happen to me and how is my life going to go now.
You're right. And, you know, that quote was, I came across that and I thought, you know, that really makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, seeing the life that Florence Nightingale lived and some of the tragedies she faced and growing as a nurse and coming home from the rehab, you know, it's a whole nother, almost like a surreal thing. It's almost like returning to a good dream that you had before you were rudely put into another nightmare. But more about coming home and saying, wow, what do I do now? I mean, you feel very isolated. I noticed that, you know, even though I was seeing some friends and doing some outpatient therapy here and there and had a girlfriend, which was nice, you know, you feel so far removed from the real world. And I thought, you know, I had a small taste of that. I graduated college from Texas A&M and went on and was fortunate enough to land a job with a Fortune 50. It was in real estate and oil. And I had a taste of that for about 3 weeks. And then, you know, going into my fourth week, we experienced the accident and just, you know, that whole traumatic situation, going through the hospital and rehab for 6 months. Getting back to that home environment after seeing and maybe going through so much. You know, I think a lot of the veterans could probably relate to that emotional toil that takes place. So, you know, coming home, it's just like, wow, where do I start? How can I start? And that sort of started that. And I, initially was there a lot of fear involved for me. I would say that I really didn't give myself time to dwell on it. I think that makes all the difference in the world. I think if we allow ourselves, and it's easy to do, to think about it too much, to think about what happened, the negativity and everything involved, as opposed to maybe trying to look ahead, trying to look forward, and maybe just trying to push that whole thing away from us so it doesn't absorb us, but gives us an opportunity to maybe focus on something maybe we could work toward the head to maybe move in that direction. So I didn't really come home with a lot of fear, to be honest. Even though here I am now, an able-bodied guy, beforehand benching 320 pounds and water skiing and running and doing all sorts of neat stuff, and all of a sudden, bang, paralyzed my shoulders down. Now, should that maybe give me some fear? Maybe, but I think the competitive edge I had kind of growing up said, you know what, I'm going to show others. That was my goal. I'm going to show others things aren't that bad. I'll somehow come out of this. Now, it sounds kind of hard to imagine.
It's hard for me to imagine it completely. Because I just think about stuff like that, and my mind can take me to the scariest places so fast. And I'm very impressed that you would have such a strong, trauma and just go, I'm going to see, what I can do from here on. I think I would have been somebody that really dwelled on, I'm screwed.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do grieve, Bob. The grieving process is different for probably everyone, and it's healthy to do it. Some people would ask me, said, "Why? Did you go through a rough time?" And I'd say in the first 3 weeks of the hospital, laying there, seeing my body melt, just, and all of a sudden just feeling that bang. All of a sudden you're 25 years thrust into a hospital bed, unable to move anything, and at one point not even able to talk. That was a little frustrating to say the least. But then I kind of stopped myself, and I had no idea what was ahead. I knew it was not good, probably, from a movement standpoint. But kind of just sat back and just said, let's get to the next stage, the next stage, the next stage. So broke it down without trying to stare too hard into the future, because the future is hard to stare into for any of us. By breaking it into gaps, trying to maybe make a timeline. Don't try to stare too far out in the future, but setting achievable things along that timeline kind of makes you feel like you are maybe limping or moving forward to whatever degree you can. And I think that's what kind of helped me. I thought, you know what, I don't want to sit here. I don't like to watch TV in the afternoon. The shows are pretty boring. So I said, let's think of something else. So then we decided, at the one point to become a money manager, and kind of figured that I don't need physical ability to do that. It's going to be interesting. I knew I'd get bored easily if I was working for like one company making like one product, or maybe advancing that product or something. I just found I would be very bored doing that. A lot of times with this injury, they try to move you initially toward like a computer type field. Today, that's great because I'm on the internet myself quite a bit. But back then it was very, it was like bulletin board type stuff. The internet really wasn't really in full swing yet. So the opportunities available to people with disabilities weren't as great, or as wide as they are today. And so that's why I didn't want to do that. Sit in a little room, write computer code or whatever. But I don't want to get off track here. But I think by setting goals kind of kept that fear at bay. Kind of, it wasn't even something I really try to focus on.
I was looking at the chapter on keeping a positive versus a negative attitude, and I was looking at this. There was a little section in there of ask yourself this, and I'll read the 4 things because it was really, really great. I would say my own one of my issues in life is negative thinking, dominating positive thinking without, especially if I don't give it effort. That's where I go. So I have to really work at positive thinking. So this is, ask yourself this. Number 1, how many times have you been excited to hang out with a negative person? Number 2, how often do you try to avoid their text messages, emails, and phone calls? Number 3, if at work or just out in public, do you try to avoid them or go in the opposite direction when you know they're headed your way? Number 4, how many of you breathe a deep sigh of relief when a negative person leaves your personal space? that's from the standpoint of, how do I feel about negative people and, all that stuff. So why would I think that I can get away with being negative and, attracting good things to me? Because my reaction to negativity is negative people is to run away. I don't want to be around it.
Right, right, exactly. That's kind of why we put that in there because I thought, there's power in a positive attitude, and I think you can attract like-minded people that are positive. I think what you'll find is that if somebody's negative, I mean, first off, I like to kind of maybe try to see quickly, if I can, to any degree, through their eyes. What are they experiencing now to make them negative? Is it, is this, are they close and I'm aware that their mother's ill, for instance, where I can kind of understand that feeling? Is it just somebody out in public that you just have no clue where they're coming from or what their mental state is? Based on how many people we can meet that kind of cross our path in life. Is it the random meeting which turns into our wife of 50 years? If you're negative going out, you're never going to experience these possibilities. There's really not a lot of value in carrying a negative attitude when you just break it down to simple numbers.
Yeah. It seems like you were a pretty positive person even before that you had the accident. It sounds like you were very excited about life and, really doing a lot of things. So maybe, your upbringing was that.
Yes, and Bob, I'll tell you, I know all the advantages that you would want of parents. They're both hardworking. They both use the law of attraction every day. Not only the law of attraction, but more the golden rule. And they treat everybody like that. I mean, I've been out and seen them in public since I was a kid. And never a disrespectful word. Um, just always being kind and just being nice to people. I mean, not being taken advantage of and being foolhardy. They're both very, very smart and had gone to Ivy League schools, and just know how to treat people, just evolve, and I think it makes a big difference today. Are there differences between my mother and father? Yes, I talked about that in my childhood. It's not in one of the books, but my mother's a Democrat, my father's a Republican. So of course you can imagine some of the conversations when politics rolls around or some key thing being voted on. So there is a difference there, but there's the differences were so minute compared to the overall the overall love and friendship they have for each other. And I witnessed that growing up. And I think a lot of times today, I think a lot of my attitude probably was a result of, probably the foundation I had, a normal, good Midwestern type upbringing, moving around a lot, meeting a lot of different people in these different states where my father was transferred. And being, fortunately being I'm not gonna say gifted by any stretch, but I would say, athletically inclined helped, and wanting to be competitive and meet people and have fun. So I think that helped a lot. Plus, I have three brothers and a sister, and they're all great. They all kind of follow the same thing. They all like to work out and have fun, and wrestling like bears in my mother's living room. But she didn't appreciate that. But all in all, just a great childhood, great upbringing. My parents are still fortunately with us today, and good. Nothing's ever changed.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. A nice, warm family
Yeah, it's kind of
atmosphere seems to
kind of a
offer a
rare
lot.
thing. Yeah, and sadly, it's kind of a rare thing today when you really kind of look at the whole thing. I mean, 50% of people in a divorce, and I'd say a lot of people carrying traumas that are just tragic upbringings, and you imagine what generational divorce rates would have on future populations. It's just going to be more traumatic, more challenging as we continue in these endless wars. That's going to add more to trauma. And there's going to be a lot of people that need help out there that face challenges.
Well, I wanted to read this. I forget which chapter this was in. Um, it might have been in the health and wellness chapter of your book. I'll read it to you. After several years living with paralysis, it became possible for me to look back and determine if certain repeated health setbacks I experienced and considered common for my level of injury were just something to live with and accept. That any additional effort I made on my own to understand my condition wouldn't be necessary, and just relying on my physicians was enough. I learned early on that that approach wouldn't suffice, judging by the friends and associates I knew living with disabilities who were frequent visitors back to health centers and regularly. I determined 6 months in hospitals and rehab settings for me was more than enough and decided that it was important to conduct plenty of research on my own. Then I would consult with my doctor what I had learned. I knew it was really up to me to learn all I could to stay healthy, active, and productive. So I love this idea of taking responsibility for your health and not saying, oh, you, Mr. Expert, tell me what I need. Consulting them obviously is fine, but there are, plenty of people that don't really take that, uh, it's one of the few things you have is a body, and how do you take care of it? It's kind of a big question, and there's, a lot of people that kind of go through life and don't really think about what they put into their body and how they treat it, and um, so at some point you obviously took this big responsibility for your recovery, physical recovery, and health for yourself, and did a lot of work on that.
Yes, Rob, you're right. And one of the, as I mentioned also about health and wellness, if you have a disability, if you have a disease, if you are getting older and you're elderly, you can have some Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, whatever it would be, and you're finding yourself weaker and more frail, whether it's from that one of those three. You're prone to certain health setbacks that are pretty prevalent, pretty prominent in your particular field. Now, whether it's ALS or MD or MS or paralysis, there's a host of things that are they can cause one of those three, like a skin breakdown, for instance, a UTI, respiratory issues. What I learned was that I myself early on was starting to getting probably some UTI. Well, I was getting some UTIs and things like that. And there's things that kind of slow you down and hold you back by a week or a couple of days. And then I'd see friends of mine going to the hospital where just standard antibiotics wasn't working for them. They were on some pretty heavy IV drips and all sorts of things in there for long periods of time. And then you hear about some skin breakdowns. They just didn't take good care of what they were, like maybe the cushion they were sitting on in a wheelchair, for instance. Today it's great. I mean, it's a hell of a lot easier to kind of explore, findings and finding, information that's not, maybe put out there by a pharmaceutical or, information not put out by one of the top six research companies, which researches the medications and vitamins in today's country. We have about 6 companies that do that, which is very narrow. And a lot of them are, I'm not going to say hooked to the pharmaceuticals, but a lot of the pharmaceuticals do fund their research. So there's a lot of, there's definitely a conflict there of some sort. Knowledge is what's going to keep me out of the hospital. It's not going to be running the doctor after the fact with, a bad UTI or, going there with some mark on my ankle that got hurt from a wheelchair leg rest or something where it kind of ripped it open. So we kind of learned that, there's certain things we can do. We can, different ways to be more proactive, different ways to kind of monitor our blood, monitor our results, and add things that are important to skin, like vitamin C, which is great for building collagen, which helps out a lot. It takes that lipoprotein A from our bloodstreams. It helps us in so many ways as far as keeping the human body healthy, and especially when living with a disability or a disease. I mean, I think it's vital. The vitamin D, vitamin C, magnesium, B's, a lot of the B's and some omega-3, it's very important to maintain those. And what I found was that, it's usually meet people that go, yeah, I take vitamin C. I take a multi in the morning. It's got 500 milligrams of C. And they're coming down with the flu a week later. So I found that wasn't enough. And so I started reading the work of Dr. Linus Pauling, which I talk about in the chapter. Finding humans lost the ability to process vitamin C naturally 12,000 years ago. And felines and cats can do it today. And, primates and humans kind of lost that ability. As a result, we're vitamin C deficient in a lot of ways. We're vitamin D deficient, especially in the wintertime. And there's been a lot of studies about, the sun, we can bring in 20 to 30,000 IUs into our skin with 30 minutes of direct sunlight. We're not getting that here, especially in the Northeast. So, I see a lot of people around me getting flus, coming down with sickness. And if they just had vitamin D and C added to their standard blood lineup, something very simple to kind of keep their levels above in the optimal ranges, would cut down on their sicknesses at least in half, I think. So there's a lot of things that, we can do. And if we can avoid the colds, the flus, the respiratory illnesses, which I've been able to avoid, by maintaining a stronger regimen and vitamins that help keep, paralyzed bodies healthier. You can eliminate a lot of things. And I think any human can do this. It doesn't have to be the guy that's hitting the gym 2 hours a day. It could be the guy that's as frail as 87 years old and can barely walk anymore. I mean, the vitamin C for him would be a life changer.
Could be.
So
No.
just, yeah, so it really gets down to knowledge, Bob, I think. And I think that, I found, today, sadly, a lot of people just go to doctors, and if it's a sadness or depression or anxiety or stress, maybe and also instead of looking for like the roots of these causes, just a lifetime of prescription pills, which, kind of numb the joy of living and, make these more difficult to focus and set goals to bring back some happiness. So it's kind of a cycle that we think it's kind of been perpetuated by, just a kind of an easy way out, kind of like a band-aid on something that's been under there a long time.
It became like a thing, a way of thinking in the country with what they would call modern medicine and magic pills and all that stuff. Like, oh, we've advanced so far in our as a species here in the United States in particular that we can make a pill that'll fix anything, and it's easy. It was sort of maybe even along the lines when like fast food came in, even, and frozen vegetables thrown in a pot of boiling water. It was this idea that we've arrived at some easier type of a life that didn't require responsibility, really.
I think a lot of times, when we look at these medications or pills, then, as being the quick way out, it can bring some temporary relief or just a life of fogginess. And, and sometimes that's preferable to what they did in the 1860s when they had a lot of pain, where you just drank six times as much as people do today. But the question is, are we pursuing information? Or are we pursuing pleasure and fast outcomes?
What I wanted to ask you too, though, you mentioned that you had read a lot of Linus Pauling's work. Are there some other people that you might recommend to the listeners that gave you a lot of good information in terms of health that you would like to pass on to people?
Chris Reeves was out there in his day with spinal cord injury, and he did a lot for spinal cord research as far as on his website, the Reeves Foundation. But
oh, great! What's that name again? What was the name again?
The Reeves Foundation.
Okay, for Christopher Reeves. Okay.
Yeah, he did a lot, and there really has been nobody since him. Really, I mean, Michael J. Fox has done some things out there, which is great. The only reason I mentioned Pauling was, kind of the fascination I had with vitamin C and knowing what it can do for rebuilding skin and tissue and collagen and emptying the blood of fat. Vitamin C, has the ability to almost turn back into a stem cell. It's what they call it, the only miracle vitamin out there. The old wives' tale was that you would actually, what your body doesn't need, it just excretes out. Well, the truth is that it actually holds about 9,850 milligrams. And some of those convert into compounds your body's low on. The book wasn't put out there to, be the tell-all or be the, I'm not going to call it the secret, even though I don't think the secret's any better than this. But, as far as the, the ability to just to say, you know what, let me think about this. Let me get these blood tests added. Let me at least get up, keep this up now in my current state, not knowing a lot. And then see what we can do, see what we can add to from there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it for me with in terms of staying healthy is I've had to over the years try certain things and really pay attention to whether they're helping or not helping. So there's some experimentation that takes place. Like when I am feeling like I'm going to get like I'm getting sick, I found this stuff, I forget who told me about it, oil of oregano, and they make this very strong, take the oil out of the oregano plant, and it's kind of an antiviral, antibacterial, natural product. I love it. It works great. It works great for me. My wife can't stand it and says it doesn't work for her. So, I don't know why, but it works for me. It doesn't work for her. She has other things that work for her that I don't care for at all. So we've kind of tried these different things on the suggestions of other people or, reading about them. So, it's really, I guess we're coming back to where we started with this, is taking responsibility for your own health.
Bobby said that's exactly right. And like, we're all different. We're all unique and we'll all react. We all have different, maybe some of us have different allergies than others. And you're right. I mean, there's, I've had lots of assistants that come in, and fortunately, most of them are most of them all pretty health oriented. So they'll come in and go, Dave, you got to check out this new vitamin I just read about. And, it's got 8 times the potency of protein, but you're not getting all the animal fat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So so that's been pretty helpful. And I think today with the internet, I think if you search out the right sites, you can learn a lot. And that's the field's wide open. I'm heartened by the fact that a lot of people I know that some assist me. They're from 25 to 35 on average in that age range, and very health conscious, very more plant based, and do their vitamins and come across different ones that look pretty cool. And like I said, I experiment too. And I'll say, hey, is that a difference? And, after a while, I just found myself not getting sick. So I really rarely ever get sick anymore. And probably had a cold and a half in 8 years now. And
that's amazing.
Literally been in the hospital. Like, I didn't get a bad UTI. I couldn't do it at home. It was intravenous I had to do. And, that took me. But that was the first time since I've been hurt. Stay out of the hospital. I think if you stay out of the hospital, that's your best bet.
The hospital's a really great place to get sick in.
Yeah,
people. I was in the hospital a number of years ago with pretty bad pneumonia from bacterial infection. I don't know, just blindsided me. And as I was starting to get better, the doctor said, "Well, I think you're good enough to leave. You're healthy enough to leave because you don't want to stay here too long because really bad stuff happens if you do. You'll get something else." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go."
So I've been doing a couple of that, drinking warm water with lemon in the mornings, and it's great.
I do that actually. That's funny. I would do that too. Yeah. I love that. I love the way I feel after I drink water with some lemon in it. I can't tell you why. I tried it, and it just feels like my body says to me, "Yeah, this is right. You should be doing this." And so I keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, thank you.
I don't even know why it's good for me.
What I understand, I haven't really read much on it because I just got to follow her advice and like it. I've been doing green tea and lemon for years. And what's cool about green tea, not to segue, but if you add just a little lemon to green tea, it turbocharges those catechins and the antioxidants by 13 times. So if you drink green tea, throw a little lemon in there, and drinking a cup's like drinking 13 cups with lemon.
Okay, so lemons, everybody. Check those out. They're easy to get.
Yeah, if you stick the lemons, green tea, vitamin C, and vitamin D.
Now I'm looking at another chapter here that I wanted to talk about because it's meditation and moving forward. It's the title of the chapter, and I'm going to read the 2 quotes that you have at the top of that chapter. They're both fantastic. This first one's from a guy named Buddha. That was supposed to be kind of funny.
All right.
The quieter you become, the more you can hear. And the second quote's from Carl Jung. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks within awakens. I know that meditation's been a big part of your life. I don't know if it was part of your life prior to your accident or it became something that obviously you increased your meditation after.
That didn't really enter into my world until probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So it hadn't even been that long.
Oh, okay. How did you discover it?
Well, I talked about it in my first book, and I also talked about it here at the beginning chapters under meditation. It was when I was in the hospital. So I might have always had this kind of natural, I'm not going to say meditation state, but, I came up with the idea of when I was in the hospital, I was starting to slip backwards. I wasn't sleeping. I was assigned a sleep medication. I was fighting the effects of that as well. And that's when I really didn't have a lot of trust in the hospital. I mean, I'm getting all these procedures done. I mean, my body's still not moving, and I'm getting poked and prodded and cut open and this, that, and the other. I feel like Frankenstein. And I kind of talk about that in the book in the first book about, how you're kind of an experiment. And they're doing all they can, but there's certain things you have to do to, with spinal cord injury and all that. But I was starting to slip backwards. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't comfortable. You're in pain. I didn't take any pain pills, so I wasn't knocked out every night on something. one night, for whatever reason, I just knew, I was starting to hallucinate. I was doing flips in my bed, seeing the clock spin backwards, feeling myself kind of almost like floating out of my body at times, things like that. So anyway, I pictured a large map of the U.S. and pictured myself in a steam locomotive and visualized myself as a conductor. And the goal to get my mind back was to stop that train in San Francisco after leaving Philadelphia. So at first, as my temperature's rising, the nurses came out of my room, and my body's, the beeping's monitoring. So I'm trying to, and I never consciously did this before. I was trying to close out the sounds of the beeping, try to get my mind under control. And somehow I saw this train on the tracks, and it started off almost like a rocket sled. It was on fire. It was moving so fast out of Philadelphia, like my mind was spinning that fast. And I did notice that after a while, the wheels on the train, pretty early on, I noticed the wheels on the train was starting to match my spinning mental state. So I thought to myself, I can slow this train down before it gets to San Francisco, across all the Midwest and all the states, and through Arizona and Utah and California. I said I get my control back because I was losing it. I was hallucinating, uncontrolled. This one, whatever it hit me when I woke up suddenly awake, and so anyway, we did that. So we visualized a train. I would kind of get out of the train and look down at this big map, seeing the train going across like an old map of the states. Get myself back inside the train. So my mind was going back and forth. Now, could some of that have been due to the temperature? Sure, anything's possible. But I kept doing it, and then after a while, I noticed with a lot of concentration and focus, and knocking out all the distractions around me, knocking out the noise in the room, thoughts of my paralysis, thoughts of when the nurse would come back in, literally taking everything out of that room except me, the map, and the train. And I found myself able to start to slow it down. So that brought pretty much the first good feelings or feelings of exhilaration since I'd gotten in the hospital, because you're basically out of control. You're just you're being kind of turned, prod, whatever things you're going through without any control really. Beyond staying awake and waiting for something else to go on. So that helped greatly. I slowed the train down enough and just kept concentrating, using my mind and basic creative imagery, sort of a meditative trance, because you're taking everything else out of the equation, but those three things. And was able to slow it down to the station, and bang, right after that, I laid there. I said, wow, that was weird. Where'd that come from? And that was just kind of popped into my head, and maybe it was some help from some other source trying to say, hey, this will work, and put those images in my mind. I mean, anything's possible, but it did work. And after that, I found myself getting a lot more rest, fall asleep, not fearful of that. Somebody's gonna, a nurse gonna come in and kill me like I thought she was initially. A couple of nights I was hallucinating, like I think the night nurse was trying to take me out or something. It was pretty funny. I got more into the interest of exploring through hypnosis, more so than I did trying to be happy or stress free, because I was already happy and stress free. So I really didn't even focus on those things to bring those feelings that Buddha felt. And they asked someone, not just give a little background. One time, when somebody asked Buddha once, I think I had a thing in the book. He goes, what have you gained from meditation? And Buddha said, it's really not what I've gained, it's what I've lost. I've lost depression, I've lost stress, I've lost anxiety, I lost an ability to control my emotions and self in front of others and this, that. And I agree with all those. But, a lot of those things I think I pretty much had under control anyway. I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't distressed. I found I was able to open my mind up wider, kind of open up the whole crown chakra, the pineal gland, and being able to begin to see things maybe in different ways that, I might not have explored before. Some people might have said they've experienced that with, marijuana, for instance. I think some people feel that they can open up doorways. And I would agree with that as well. I think there's a lot of complex carbons out there that, provide ways for the human mind to do this. And meditation will do the same thing, without chemicals, put it that way.
Yeah, and side effects.
Right.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, though, that you would come to meditation just on your own. I think the first time I tried meditation was I had taken a yoga class because I was having a lot of stress, and I could feel it in my shoulders and my neck. And somebody goes, "Oh, take this yoga class, and you'll stretch out." And And one of the benefits was at the end of the class, they meditated, and I had never done that before. And I like that probably as much, if not more, than the actual yoga practice, which I don't do the yoga anymore, but I do meditate. And it's just, it's been great for me. I just, even if it's 5 minutes, it resets priorities inside me for a nice big chunk of the day.
What I found for myself, though, was that my best experience with meditation, the highest quality meditations, with the least amount of time, even, or I could extend as long as I wanted, especially at night when you're going to sleep anyway, was during the early morning when you first wake up. And instead of, a lot of times, my girlfriend's guilty of this as well, is, hitting the snooze alarm, and, 15 minutes later, another, same music goes off again. And instead of taking that time and just kind of trying to capture those last 15 minutes of sleep before you got to get up, or starting to think about your day, I found that you're already in like a theta state. You're coming out of a delta state into a theta state. And that is the opportune time to sit there and just lay there. And, visualize your body. It's kind of like a large battery, and you're just bringing down an energy down through your crown chakra, all through your body, to almost like filling a battery up to begin the day. And then allow your body to just kind of absorb that and lay there. And I think, the tossing and turning all night long, I tell you, the 15 minutes of just laying there and allowing you to feel that strength build within, and visualizing that in your mind, and then getting out of bed. I mean, it's, or visualize yourself, working on a problem of some sort. And for example, if you look at what Nikola Tesla used to do, they didn't have CAD CAM software back in his day. What he would do is he would visualize like a 3D CAM image swirling into his mind. And he would go back and leave that image there, and he'd go back and work on it and fix it and readjust it. That's how he said he came out with a lot of his inventions, was by picturing that in his mind and working on it in his mind. It's like like a holographic type image. So a lot of people through the years have taken advantage of meditation. Einstein came up with this theory of relativity. He said he would sit back in his chair, like maybe his pipe and his famous pipe in his mouth, and sit back, and he would visualize himself riding on the comet through space and seeing what time and gravity would do to that comet and how it might bend it. So that's how he said he came up with his theory of relativity. And then you look at the other greats from the past, Plato, Da Vinci, all of them went into some type of a meditative trance to come out with what they knew and what they shared with the world. So I think meditation can open up ways not only see things on our, that we're personally interested or working on, but it opens up doors which can change, a lot of things on mankind.
It's interesting you had mentioned Tesla, because I had read a couple books about him, and as a child, he really had a lot of bad headaches, where he had to be in a darkened room with no noise, and he had a lot of physical sort of issues that sort of sent him into these altered states.
Yeah.
And then he was able to turn that, I guess you would call it a liability, into this huge asset, where he was able to, visualize these amazing inventions. I mean, I read that he saw the whole thing, from beginning to end, how to do this stuff, so it sort of taps into. He was able to tap into portions of the mind that most of us can't, or haven't been able to as of yet. I found that really interesting, that he could, just see an invention and know how to do it just like that. I'm sure obviously there was trial and error after that, but that, that liability or disability or, whatever, challenge he had to overcome was the thing that was the catalyst for him to go inside deeper and then come up with these, amazing things. That's a great story. If no one's ever read about any biographies of Tesla, that it's pretty fantastic.
Well, you're exactly right, Bob. I mean, we're still using an alternator today. He's responsible for a lot of the satellite stuff we have, and helicopter rotations, all sorts of things. And, and like you said, it was that disability that kind of moved him toward that, sitting in a darker room for hours at a time. Also, before you go to bed at night, you're starting to drift off a little bit. You're falling a little bit asleep. Think about something, and there's a lot of different things you could do, not just visualizing making something or thinking over that day and that problem at work you could have solved. And now you're seeing it in different ways. So there are a lot of advantages, but a lot of it also is that, it has been proven that under regular meditative practice, that you can actually increase the prefrontal cortex in your mind. You can create new connections between your left and right hemispheres of your mind. It reduces the amygdala, which is kind of the reptilian part of our brain, which is that flight or fight section, the primitive part. So what they found is under intense meditation, it actually shrinks the amygdala. It increases the prefrontal cortex, which is memory, which is empathy and compassion. And that's why I think if you just look at it, if you just look around the world today and kind of look at, we've seen some, riots in Tibet and things like that with some of the Chinese situations going on. But all in all, a pretty peaceful bunch that are meditating, and there's a lot to be said for that. Also, when you look at it today, you look at what is being done, what it's doing for people that are incarcerated. And I think the biggest thing I think we're going to find is as we go forward in life, those with traumatic head injuries, whether it could be from some CTE from playing professional football or sports, can reverse this by meditation and chanting and things like that. And the human mind is is more plasticized than we realize, and a lot of doctors are finding that out, seeing strange things where people are operating at a very high IQ level with a smaller part of their brain. It's kind of where we were back in the 40s with running. In other words, if you saw somebody running by, you would think he was being chased by the police.
That's right.
Or you would think, or somebody's chasing her for some reason, some money and jealous ex-husband. I mean, who knows? But you're seeing that, and that's where meditation is kind of at the forefront. You're seeing it being introduced to a lot more things. And I think a lot of that's due to some of the science of what they're finding. They're finding that 20 minutes a day for 8 weeks straight. Some MRIs before and after the fact at Harvard and Stanford and some of these big teaching institutions. It's finding like, wow, they've increased gray matter. They've increased the number of glial cells in our mind. Now look at these new connections starting to form. So that's what a lousy 20 minutes a day for 8 weeks does. So if somebody has some time and they go to one of these retreats and they're spending 3 or 4 hours a day, different parts of the day, maybe an hour here, with different, group things in between. I think you'd be amazed at what it is. And I told people, I said, look, I never would have written my first book if I didn't meditate. I just couldn't sit there with my mind open like that. Just let it free flow out. Or the second book. I mean, meditation's opened up doorways for me. I'm well aware of it.
Happy that it's making its ways into schools and places where you can educate really young kids on these possibilities. It was unheard of when we were kids. It was, like you said. I was reading. I wanted to do this a couple other quotes from the book, because that always helps me to kind of go into the next little area. This was, I think, in the chapter Overcoming Obstacles and Setbacks, Career and Workplace. This first quote is from Henry Ford. Life is a series of experiences, each one of which makes us bigger, even though sometimes it is hard to realize this. For the world was built to develop character, and we must learn that the setbacks and grieves which we endure help us in our marching onward. That was a great quote. And the second one was from Jeffrey Fry. Failure, loss, and defeat are just mile markers on the road to success. So, the idea that there is no such thing as failure. It's just, it's a step toward the next success, the next thing. I try to talk to my kids about that a little bit when they, get disappointed or whatever. And so, well, you weren't born knowing how to do anything like that, like what you're trying to do now. So why would you expect that the first or second time you try something, you're gonna be good at it? It's just, and there's no one like that. No one's born knowing how to, work a computer or take a math class or anything like that. It's all a learning experience.
Like another one Martin Luther King said, it was an original book, was, faith is taking that first step, even if you don't see the whole staircase.
I always wonder how some people seem to be born knowing that, they just seem to go, well, yeah, I'm going to get there.
I've had that with a few things that I've done in my life where I just went, oh, I can do that, and I have no reason to think that other than I think it. And there's other things where I go, there's no way I can do that.
Yeah, just that's one of the things I looked at. I thought, okay, I would be a money manager. I don't know anybody. I don't know any athletes. I don't know anybody owning any firms. I don't even know anybody working for a brokerage firm, really. But that's where he's going to break into smaller goals. Say, just chip away at whatever you want to do. If you want to climb Everest, or dive off the high dive. And I wrote about that. You're not going to try that first. You're not going to jump in the ring with Iron Mike Tyson the first time around back when he was fighting. So you just got to kind of work your way up. And, I think a lot of people, due to that thing you mentioned earlier about being more time oriented or time focused, a lot of them aren't putting the time into what it takes to maybe, get to that step. And they're kind of wanting the career, the gratification up front without realizing there's actually a lot of the behind the scenes thing that's got to take place first to really get that opportunity.
This friend of mine, this is an interesting, I don't know what made me think of this. He has a friend of his that's a school teacher. And the school teacher, I think it was a middle school teacher, asked the students to write down what their goals, their main goal was. And just take a guess what the prevalent goal of most of these kids was. I'm going to let you take a guess.
Well, I'm sure it varied from being a rock star or an astronaut to maybe an actor.
Yeah. Well, kind of. The overall goal was to be famous.
Or famous, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, and and sometimes they ask, "How do you want to be famous?" I don't care. I just want to be, like that's become a thing. I don't know if that has to do with some of the reality TV shows and people being financially rewarded for just being who they are without really much of a offering to the society.
Right.
But I thought that was a really interesting kind of a thing, like the goal being like a non-goal to me. It's just like what's that going to get you? Even if you achieve that, then what? Like what are you contributing? I just kind of blew me away. I was like, it kind of made me sad.
And I'll tell you, go back a decade or a generation or two earlier, have steady employment, meet the girl of my dreams. These would be the kind of goals they'd have.
Yeah.
As opposed to today, where it's like I want to be rich, I want to be famous, and without how do you get there? And I think you're right. I think a lot of the reality TV have seen kind of what you consider fairly average contributions to society overall. Somehow be propelled in the limelight.
Kind of go, what happened here in this country?
It's interesting. It spawns the whole gamut. I mean, you can get famous showing how to put squirrel heads in a bucket down in Louisiana. You get famous doing that, or you can take it all the way up to where you get more cosmetic plastic surgery than anybody else and wear the latest fashions. I mean, you could literally take it on all, and there's a whole range in between there.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to this the last quote that I wrote down that you put in your book about what are we valuing as human beings, and I'll read it to you.
Okay.
It's not enough to have lived. We should be determined to live for something. May I suggest that it be creating joy for others, sharing what we have for the betterment of person, kind, bringing hope to the lost and love to the lonely. Leo Pascaglia.
If you can do something that maybe it's lucrative, it doesn't harm society. Maybe live society. How's it get better than that? I mean, it could be anything from a medical profession where you're helping others recover from illness to, inventing a product that's doesn't have negative side effects and, help society, whether it's, some of the inventions Tesla made, or is it, maybe a better mode of communication like the iPhone, for instance.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're doing some of that yourself with some of your hypnosis tapes and meditation tapes. You want to talk a little bit about those? Because I've listened to two of them, one for sleep and one for pain relief, which, I mean, you obviously have studied this stuff and practiced it yourself, and now you're going to pass that along to people with some of these great tapes. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, what I found, Bob, that hypnosis has been something that that I've been able to, I guess, do with others for probably about 10 years now, I guess, give or take. And I'd always had kind of an interest in it. Whether it was being hypnotized myself. I remember back when I was starting at Merrill Lynch years ago, I saw a lady on TV, hypnotize 3 people. I thought, wow. They thought they were, this about a 50-year-old man thought he was like a Chinese boy living in some ancient China province back like 1800s, described his outfit. He had no idea what the hell they were wearing in those areas, let alone describing, where this province was in China, where it was located, what it was near, who was in command then. So he just had all this information that would have been impossible for him to really know himself overall. And the same happened to the other 2. So I thought, wow, that's kind of neat. So my interest initially kind of came from that. I did witness, some past life regressions, knowing who we are, what happens to us after we die, things like that came kind of interest. So I kind of had more of an interest in that. So anyway, what we started doing was kind of some regressions on others, kind of bringing them into a deep superconscious state to where they would actually share lives. For example, I had a 26-year-old female, smart, nice, majored in English, described about her life as a Nazi colonel and Panzer tanks and her squad getting hit in her squadron of 13 tanks getting hit near the Belgian border in France in 1944 in the fall, and this, that, and the other. And, what happened inside the tank, how the tanks run, just all this information on a Panzer tank, which I had no idea about, and she didn't either. And, but was sharing, how they would move and speed, what kind of numbers, what battalion was it she was in, what was her name, what were her parents' names, what rank was she, what were the colonels, and who was involved with this squadron. So just a lot of really inside, what appeared to be inside information or knowledge on her experience as a colonel in Nazi Germany. So we started finding that, wow, that's fascinating. So we got a lot of details. Next person would be an Indian in 1700s. And what was neat about it is they would speak to me in, like, I would ask certain words because they weren't English. It was some Indian dialect. And I would ask, like, how do you say fish? How do you say bear? How do you say sun, water? A lot of different things, buff, whatever. And literally later on, I go, now, how did you say that again? This is something they weren't even supposed to. They would respond back perfectly. And in his Indian dialect, exactly what that word was, what their names were, where they lived, where they battled. I mean, just fascinating things. So I've always believed in reincarnation. I know that I can say this for people listening that, a lot might not believe in reincarnation, think that you have one life and that's it. But I would like to share, at least maybe look at it, maybe research it, kind of get a little more idea about that. Even in our Bible, for instance, up to the year 325 AD, going into the year 370 AD, reincarnation was in the Bible. There was Origin was on the council back in that time, and one of the leading church founders, and voted for it to be in there, and Constantine decided it shouldn't be in there, and so they took it out. It was like a 512 political. There was like a political body that voted on that in Rome at the time. So anyway, it was in the Bible up for 300 something years after the death of Christ, and I just think if you look at a lot of the other religions around the world, they believe in the immortality of the soul, the survival of the consciousness, and we've seen recent works by Dr. Eben Alexander, who was a neurosurgeon. The last 5 years, say, he went into a coma and was suffering from spinal meningitis, and expressed his journey on the other side. So I enjoyed reading about near-death experiences, people floating out of their bodies and reading serial numbers on the top of lights that, fluorescent lights up in the ceiling, remembering that. Kind of remember what their parents were doing 5 states away at that 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what the doctors said at certain times. And clinically they were just brain dead or in a deep, deep coma. So those things fascinated me. So we started doing that ourselves. We've done a lot of regressions on people, and then we started, instead of just doing a regression, we said, they would come to me with pain. They would have They were most of them were athletic. They would injure themselves in the gym. Back, necks, arms, scapulas. One girl started calling out of work. It was a high school basketball player. Was rough. Not rough, but used to taking a hit on the
Yeah.
floors and everything else. And that came to me with a tumor on her kidney. We started working on that and trying to shrink that down. And just doing these kind of things and finding that the power of the human mind in a hypnotic state has been fascinating and phenomenal. And couldn't reach out to a lot of different people, so started making various tapes with some of the ones I'd sent you on pain and the one on sleep.
Yeah, well, they're great. I've listened to the two that you sent me, and I really liked them a lot. So, if people want to listen to those tapes, they can go to your website. Is that how you would get them?
Yeah, we have some tapes on visionpeakresources.com.
Okay.
And there's Vision, like VISION, PEAK, like a mountain, resources.com.
Great. So, I would recommend that just from the two I've listened to. It's fantastic. And I know before we go, I wanted to talk to you because I'm going to talk to you again when your third book comes out. Tell us just a little bit of a teaser on this third book because I'm interested in talking to you about that one too.
Well, one of the things we found is, and we've always been a fan, not always, but since we came across him, was Dr. Michael Newton. Dr. Byron Weiss had written some good books on Many Lives, Many Masters, and Dr. Newton had written Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, for example. And based on that and what Edgar Cayce thought, and this and that, and the other, what I would do is would take some of these past life regressions. In other words, bringing them down into a state of super conscious hypnosis to where they can recount details of past lives. And beyond that, Newton had also had something where he would actually meet council members on the other side of what they call life between lives. So what we would do is take them to the point of death. Then at that stage is, where do you go? Who comes to greet you? Is there anybody there? What do you see? And bring them into a thing. And, some of them would come up with this, I'm sitting in, I'm seeing my spirit guides. Or my grandmother's here to meet me, my deceased relatives. There's an angel here that that I know, that is well familiar to me from other lives. And on and on and on. And then we go into a council life. So what it'd be about is sort of like, what can the council tell them in this life that they're working on? Because we all come down here for lessons and experiences, and how we do those is pretty much dictates on how fast our evolution is as a consciousness or a soul. We have a biological suit, a beautiful human body that was made. When we store this conscious through our organic computers, our brains, and then you kind of walk around through life, kind of like almost like we're in virtual reality. We give them 5 senses. Some people have more 6, where they can actually see dead people, things like this. Make psychic predictions and this, that, and the other. For the rest of us that kind of limited to the 5, we're not aware that we have what's known as cosmic amnesia. In other words, we sign up for certain lessons when we're on the other side. We come back, as a baby, and bang, we're given, we have a list. It's like being in a stage play. It's like an impromptu play where we have free will. And how I see it is that, you're given a script. I'm going to be so-and-so. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have 2 children. And it's have somebody come in as your parents. You actually, based on what I've learned and what a lot of psychics that I've belief in that are international and in the tops, feel that you choose your parents in life, and you could choose them for being the perfect mommy and daddy, or you could choose them for working on lessons that you want to work on that are harder to understand what it's like to live a life as a person that has had parents that have been maybe abusive or something. So there's a lot of complexity, and I think anybody that kind of realizes really the reality is that love and math and sort of that sort of those probabilities, those timelines we can take as humans and the free will we have to exhibit down here, with a lack of really knowing our lessons. But we've all, Bob, and I'm sure you have too, all encountered someone who, who we say, wow, I feel an affinity toward that person. It could be a person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I've known you my whole life and I just met you.
Exactly. And those kind of feelings and avocations. In other words, geez, I can play the piano. I wonder why I like it. Why do I like to sing? Why do I like to draw? Why do I like pyramids? Why do I like crystals? And I found a lot of things in my life that later on under hypnosis, I said, wow, that explains why I have a house full of some rocks, for instance, or, plants or whatever. So we do find things that connect us, and it's not through our DNA, it's just through our soul and our consciousness. And the next book's going to kind of show some of these journeys that I've had the good fortune to take people through in a super conscious state, and sharing with us, what they learned about the other side, what they share firsthand, what they see in a very, very, very deep state of hypnosis, and
That
coming
sounds
out
amazing.
of it. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would enjoy that, because I think man's quest, woman's quest, in a lot of cases, not in all cases, is what happens to us when we die. What happens? Where do our parents go that we miss? Where do our loved ones, our children, are we going to see our pets again? And I think I think we don't realize, or a lot of them lose sight of the fact that everything is energy. Everything is energy, and is even just as Jesus said in the Bible. Every thought, deed, or action is recorded, and it is. And it's recorded in different ancient Egyptians called it the Book of the Dead. We know it as the Book of Life. Kind of the Akasha in Egyptian terms, which is a repository of all knowledge and all deeds and all thoughts. So, we believe in a God, we believe in a divine consciousness, a source, a collective consciousness, then we realize that that's very possible and very probable. That because you cannot, even scientists today will tell you can't destroy energy. So the book will talk about that, and different colors of souls and soul evolution, and how it's really much like a spectrum, Bob. I mean, we have young white souls, and from what I read, maybe we can kind of look at it from the actions today on the planet. About 75% of souls on Earth today are young, what they call young souls. Okay, they're here for experience and lessons. A lot of young people today that maybe are young souls today that may be bogged down, some setback, and have a hard time to get through it. Might contemplate suicide, doing harmful actions, whether it's drugs or addictions. And I'm not saying they're all young souls in that case, but it is easy to succumb to, things that keep us from finding ourselves. And that is the key, I think, in life. And Herman Hesse said it best. He said, the goal and the secret of life is to find yourself. And only through experiences and lessons, whether we're aware of them or not, is how we grow as humans and as souls.
And what's that book going to be called? Do you have a title already?
Well, we haven't really finished the title yet, but I'm sure it'll be something to do with past lives, life between lives.
Well, it's a not only a fascinating topic, but it's a brave area to start looking into for anyone. I think it's just because it's I can see what a lot of people might think, oh, that's just too strange, and who cares, and what's going on with that. But I find it incredibly fascinating. Really, where do we come from and where do we go? That's really, a fantastic question, kind of the ultimate question, isn't it? So thanks, David. I really love talking to you. The second time was as enjoyable as the first, and I'm sure number 3 will be great too.
Well, I've enjoyed it a lot too, Bob, and I want to wish you and your family happy holidays, and send us some of that warm weather if you could.
I'll try with whatever ability I have to send it to you. Well, thanks so much.
It's all in the mind, Bob. You can push it right out here.
All right. All right. Good luck for 80 degrees out there. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Great talking again, and we're always here.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Well, that was David Rippy. Love talking to him. And please get his new book, Powering Through Paralysis. And look into some of the stuff he was talking about. I mean, he's got those great hypnosis tapes for a variety of things like sleep or pain, as we talked about. And go to his website, check it out. That was David Rippy. And please come back to the podcast. Love having you listen. Thank you so much. Bye.